Bobby Fischer. Who was he? Well, he was a pretty good chess player. Arguably the best. In my opinion, he's the GOAT of chess. It's hard to compare eras, but when people are like, oh, he wouldn't be shit today, I'd be like, bro, if he still loved the game with the computers and he had what they had, I mean, he was a sicko. He would use it to its full extent. But I also just like controversial people in general. Controversial as people were supposed to be controversial. If not, you're kind of just a bot. But if I was able to sit down with anybody today and have a convo, I think it'd be Candace Owens. She was an absolute unit. But see if you could keep up with a 13-year-old Bobby Fischer, because that's how old he was in 1956 when this game was played. Okay, we got e4, c5. We get an open Sicilian, d6, and Fischer elects to play the Najdorf. Right? Attack pawn, defend pawn, caveman chess, but then a6, and you're like, oh, interesting. Have you guys seen that game where Fischer dismantled Najdorf in the Najdorf with Najdorf playing the Najdorf? It's a lot of Najdorfs, but it's also a flex to have created the most complicated opening in chess. Complex. I wanted to say complex and complicated at the same time. But yeah, a6 stops anything from coming to b5, also allows you to play b5, maybe bishop b7. And what's fascinating is white can play any developmental move. Literally any developmental move, and then it branches off into 50 moves of theory, which again branches off into 50 more moves of theory. You know how chess goes. But what's fascinating about this is it's really just a better Sveshnikov here, right? Because whereas in other Svezh lines, main lines, they go knight b5, and then you get all that b5, b4 fork type of stuff, bishop g5, knight d5. White doesn't get any of this. Essentially, he's just forced into a sideline, and it's a sideline for a reason, right? So we get bishop e7, bishop e3, castles, and pawn to f3. I was very happy because when I looked at this game, first of all, I didn't know who was playing this game. My student tests me on games during lessons sometimes. It's an interesting way to do lessons. And I was very happy because I was like, why didn't white play g4 here? And apparently Engine says f3 is a mistake and g4 is the best move. So I was pretty proud. And then I figured out it was a Fischer game and I was more proud until I found out that he was 13. So his opponent probably wasn't the greatest either. But okay, pawn to g4, it's not easy to deal with this move, right? Apparently you should go bishop e6 is the theory, and then g5, knight f to d7, h4. I wish Fischer had a game because I would have liked to seen how he replied to this, but I would play white any day of the week here, though black is very solid. It looks like kind of a real attack. Okay, f3, kind of slow, but I guess it's semi-resembling a Yugoslav where you castle queenside and go g4, h4. But I don't like this knight. I don't like it one bit. And then there's going to be quick like a5, a4 stuff. So yeah, white's position is kind of low-key discombobulated. Okay, after b5, we really should get a4 or even better, knight to d5. Because you got to stop black from playing d5, right? In this pawn structure, the backwards pawn, you need to play d5 to open up the bishop and to not be worse in a balanced endgame. So you'd get like takes, the bishop would go somewhere. And yeah, it's a nice position for white. Kind of black is frozen. That wasn't the only line, that was just a line. But we got rook to d1. Why is this such a bad move? And I'm happy because I feel like this positional book from games I've been reviewing recently, it makes it easier to say, hey, that's a bad move, that's not a bad move. Whereas before I would have just been like, that's a move. So, give yourself a pat on the back when you see yourself improving sometimes. But rook to d1, they can't castle queenside. And if they can't castle queenside, wasn't the whole idea g4, h4? So now you're going to have to push pawns in front of your king. And then black's going to be able to exploit that as well. Not as good. Knight to d7, beautiful. It can go to b6, c4. Hint, hint, later on. There is a fork there. g4 in this attack just isn't scary anymore. We got rook c8. He solved his queenside lack of development in just 2 moves. h4, but I mean, what's going to happen? Knight b6, that's going to happen. But what are these pawns going to do? Right, he goes g5, which is just a horrible move. Because now the knight just comes to h5. And when the knight freezes these pawns, the attack is essentially dead. It would be great for white if something like f4 exists. But now there's many moves, knight to g3, forking them being one of them. We got king f2. Now, what moves should scream out to be played when king f2 happens? If you said F5, respect. Point is, you just want to open up the F file because their king's on the F file and your rook's on the F file, right? Rooks like open files, semi-open files even. Pawn takes would do nothing, and now like something like knight d5 wouldn't work because there's a fork and you win a queen, and then the game. So they can't do en passant. Also, you're threatening to go f4, just, you know, win the game real quick, right? They need to give up the bishop for the knight, and then they get killed on the dark squares. So it's essentially game over here, but let's see how the conversion worked. King to g2. We get pawn takes pawn. Bishop takes knight, but we wanted that, right? Because now he has dark squared holes and his position really collapses. Okay, knight to d5, the best move, but we get a Zwischenzook right now. The bishop has to take the pawn. And this might look scary. You're like, isn't that a check? It's okay to get checked if it doesn't lead to mate. Now, here white really needed to put a rook on the f file to counterclaim. But he goes bishop to e4. Now, this move reminded me of when I play a banco. White really needs to have the bishop on c4 in the middle game, because if they don't, you clearance sack to get the knight in, wherever the knight is. So bishop to e4, I was like, oh, well, black wanted to play d5 the whole game. Now looks like the perfect time to play d5. He can't take with the queen, because that is a fork. You can't take with the bishop, really, because then that is also a fork. You win the bishop, and if they take, it just leads to a simple rook-queen checkmate, right? Like kind of like a puzzle. So he moves his bishop back. We jump in with a check. King here. Now what should you play? Don't go e4. Don't be in a rush. Go bishop to d6, adding pressure to this future discovered attack. Now e4 is going to come with momentum. When a move comes with momentum, it's even easier. He goes bishop here, attacking the rook. Do we need to move the rook? Fuck no. Pawn to e3. White resigns. Why does white resign? Well, this queen has nowhere to go. And the fact that the queen has to move, there's just no good place for it to move due to the discovery. Like knight e2, you have pawn e2, you have everything under the sun. Knight e2 is just easy. And then white could resign the next move, or the move that he did wouldn't make a difference in the result. So, did you guys keep up with the 13-year-old Fischer? Also, as you can see, I got a new apartment. I'm hyped. It's beautiful. That's all I will say. But thank you guys as always for watching. Have a great day. Boom.